Hello and you're welcome to Business Highlights on Trust TV. On the show, we take a look at major business developments as well as analyze major economic policies and how they affect the average Nigerian out there. My name is Chamun Dabeng and you're welcome to the show. Today on the show, we're going to be taking a look at something that affects all Nigerians, and that is the rising cost of goods and services in Nigeria. We'll be getting into that right after the break. Inflationary pressures are biting hard on Nigerians as the cost of goods and services continue to rise exponentially, making life hard for the country's citizens. As our Muslim brothers and sisters celebrate the Sallah, many of them have complained about the cost of buying food out there. So let's take a look at this report. According to the National Bureau of Statistics' most recent Consumer Price Index report, Nigeria's inflation hiked from 21.91% to 22.04%. Since the advent of COVID-19, prices of goods and services have continuously risen, giving Nigerians very little hope. Celebrations in Nigeria usually have consumers trooping in and out of the market. However, traders in Abuja's Utako market say they are struggling to sell their goods despite the Sallah season.
We normally the Sallah period, the lunch and buy, whether Muslim or no Muslim. We all celebrate Sallah. But this season, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But as of now, we don't have market. And the goods is so expensive.
Yes, it is moving, but not like it was before now. The sales have reduced. We hardly have people coming to buy goods like they used to before the Ramadan fast started. I sell 100 crates of eggs in a week, but this one has been here for a week and still hasn't finished. And that is because the market is not moving like before. Our friend said colleagues have all traveled. They will only resume after Salah because the market sales are slow.
Since I've been in Abuja for a while now, for over 11 years, this one is the worst. We have not enjoying the Salah. We have not even seen anything. We normally say things for baking, oil, as in flour. They will be moving, but this one, nobody's asking us how much. You can see the market everywhere is empty. They are not coming. I don't know what is the problem. I don't know whether they have not paid them or something. Me, I've been thinking it's because of the azumi they are doing that make the market dull.
With the market seemingly empty, it is evident the Nigerians are no longer able to celebrate as they once did. Hafsat Abdul Malik, a resident of Abuja, speaks on celebrating in a tight economy.
The economic situation in Nigeria is very biting. It's biting in the sense that it affects everybody. You go to the market, the price of everything commodity has gone up, and there is no income, there is no corresponding income to match it. Looking at it from the perspective of a Muslim, we are being taught to give thanks to Allah in every situation, and you don't compare yourself to others.
Hafsat is advising Nigerians to focus on the reward that comes at the end of the 30-day fasting. Traders and consumers are calling on the Nigerian government to fix the economy in order to reduce the continuous erosion of the purchasing power of the naira. All right, there you have it. You have both consumers, you have traders who are equally speaking on the same issues, where you have businesses stalling because people can no longer afford these goods and services, people who need and probably want more, but yet they cannot afford it. So as I said, we're going to be taking a deeper look into Nigeria's rising cost of goods and services. And joining me in the studio today is financial analyst, Professor Uche Uwaleke. You're welcome to the show.
Thank you
Great
so
to have
much.
you. And happy Salah, yes, compliments of the season. Yes, I would like to know your comments on the situation that the country is facing right now. Because here in the report, we have people speaking about buying food, but the cost of living, it goes beyond that. It's your rent, it's your access to clothing, it's your access to transportation, and all of that. I mean, what do you make of this, the economic situation that we're in right now?
Well, Chamon, as you know, inflation rate is on the rise, and inflation reduces the purchasing power of consumers. But let me speak with respect to the current situation, with respect to even the report that we just listened to reports of sellers not selling, their goods, reports of low demand, during this period of Sallah. I think it has more to do with the timing of the Sallah and even the Easter, season. The timing, in the sense that that this period fell in the middle of the month, and of course because the government, whether state or federal, hadn't paid salaries. Of course, it affected demand. And unfortunately, that's what you find in a situation where you have the government sector, responsible for oiling the economy. Yes, in our economy, the SMEs constitute the bulk, contributing more than 50%, to GDP. But the SMEs themselves, the small businesses, they also rely on the government, to be able to survive. And that's why you find that over the years, anytime you find the budget being delayed, government budgets are delayed, it also affects, small businesses. So when salaries are not paid, these people don't go to the market to even patronize these, small, the market trader and the small-scale businesses. So it is the inability of government to pay salaries before these festive seasons, in my view, that has resulted to the particular situation we will find. Recall that in 2016, part of why the country went into recession in 2016 was because oil price fell, and the government, both the federal and state governments, didn't have enough to pay salaries. Most state governments were owing salaries at the time. So effective demand fell, and of course, the economy went into recession. So the point I'm making is that this economy, needs some liquidity to be able to function. So when that liquidity is not there, when civil servants are not getting this money, okay, of course you should expect that demand will be low, and so the trader, won't sell. Okay, so generally speaking, we know the rising inflation is also, making things worse. And what is behind this rising inflation? We have issues of, fuel scarcity, the high cost of fuel, the high cost of diesel, okay, compounded by the high,
global inflation.
No, not global inflation. The challenge we are having in the electricity sector. Okay. Okay. Yes, the incessant power failure. So when you have incessant power failure, what it means is that people will now want to demand for fuel for their generator. And when they go to buy fuel, for generator, and the cost of fuel is rising, of course it will affect the cost of production. So you now find that it's a cycle that
it's like a ripple effect. It keeps going and extending to different areas.
High cost of fuel, high cost of diesel. You have high cost of
high manufacturing costs.
Electricity, and of course you know that the pressure is more on food. The food components,
of course,
rising food inflation. Food inflation, according to the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, is 24%, 24.5%, whereas the average inflation rate is 22.04. But the food component is high, and even according to the National Bureau of Statistics, this food component is more biting in some areas. Like in Kwara State, for example, Kwara State is reported to have the highest food inflation rate in the country, where it is as close to 29%. Okay, elsewhere in Sokoto, for example, is still less than 20%. So food is the issue. And why is food the issue? Part of why food is the issue, apart from the issue of this fuel I mentioned, and electricity, because when you have to transport, these goods from the farms, and cost of transportation, yes, is also a factor. But the major factor now affecting food inflation is insecurity. Yes, is output. Okay, we are not having enough of this, products, partly because of insecurity. So insecurity is only affecting transportation. So you have issues of fuel, you have electricity, you have insecurity, you have even exchange rate crisis, okay? And you also have the fact that interest rates are also rising. When interest rates are rising, what happens? The small scale firm, finds it difficult to access credit. And where credit is difficult to access, or assessed at a very high cost, you should also expect that these things find a way of being pushed to the ultimate consumer. So these are the reasons that are responsible for the high cost of goods and services we have in the country today.
All right, so there were two different points that I would like to actually get into at this point. Now, during the report, Hafsat, one of the speakers in the report, has stated that there's no corresponding income that goes with the rise in the cost of goods and services. Do we need to start looking into increasing salaries for civil servants?
Okay, of course, you know that when you have rising inflation and wages are fixed, wages and salaries are fixed, so it is a fixed income earner that actually suffers it. And as a matter of fact, inflation is an ill wind that blows. Nobody, gets spared from the negative impact of inflation, apart from perhaps those who borrow money. So if you borrowed money and there's inflation, that's the only time you gain. But exclude this set of people. Okay, inflation hits hard on particularly people that earn income. So I think, yes, the minimum wage as it is today, okay, at 30,000 naira is grossly insufficient. Okay, and even the minimum wage of 30,000, to the best of my knowledge, has not been implemented even in some states. Okay, so I think the current salary levels are low, and I'm aware that if there's an effort to increase the salaries of civil servants. I understand it's going to take effect from the 1st of January. So I'm in support of such an increase, but again, increasing the salaries of civil servants is not the best way to address issues of inflation. The best way to address issues of inflation will be to tackle the causes of inflation, which in my view are supply side factors. I've talked about fuel, I've talked about transport insecurity. These are things we should tackle. By the time we tackle inflation at the roots, then whatever you pay the civil servant will command some value when the civil servant goes to the market to buy. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that the response to inflation should not be to increase wages, because when you increase wages, you also tend to fuel inflation in a way, because the demand more money again chasing too few goods. But in this particular situation, as we are in Nigeria today, I think increase in wages can be accommodated, within the economy. If you come to think of it, as I said earlier on, if you look at the consumer price index, the change, okay, between the time we had the minimum wage and now, is quite significant. So I think the issue of minimum wage should be looked into.
All right. I wanted to bring up the issue of prices out there. Now, if you go to states like Lagos, the house rent is usually exponentially high. The same thing in Abuja. People find it very difficult to find proper accommodation. And not only that, you have different prices when it comes to buying food stuff. You have different prices when it comes to different services, depending on the location that you're in.
That's
the same way every single state has their own poverty rate. It just seems to be, a different situation in each state. But is there a way for Nigeria to sort of checkmate the prices of these things, create some sort of unification?
How do we determine price? Price of any commodity is determined by market forces, the forces of demand and supply. It is these forces that establish the equilibrium price for a commodity. So it is not for the government to begin to intervene, by way of maybe establishing price control. So I'm not in support of government coming to establish any price control mechanism, because by the time you do that, you distort the market and you even create, black market. So the solution is to, have more of supply, because the more supply you have of a commodity, okay, the more the price, tends to come down. Which is why I talked about food. The best way to address the food issue in the country today is to, boost supply. And how do we boost supply when there is insecurity? We have to fix insecurity, to ensure that more people are able to go to farms. And even when these things are produced, there should also be an arrangement to have enough storage, facilities, particularly for perishable items, so that even when we are off season with respect to a particular commodity, you can still find them because you have enough that you have stored. So we need to have storage facilities, and that's why I always say the government should encourage commodity exchanges. Let the private sector too assist in this things. So if you look at the MBS also gives inflation rate according to states. Okay, yes. You mentioned Lagos State, particularly for the core component of inflation. Yes, you have housing and the rest of them being high in Lagos. Of course, that's understandable. It's also demand that is fueling it. But for food, which is where the pressure is, I've told you the numbers. Food inflation is highest today in Kwara State, and it's least according to the MBS in Sokoto. So what could account for that? Okay, I also think transport, could be an issue. If food is so cheap in Sokoto and is the highest in Kwara, if you had, good means of transport, if fuel prices were not high, you could move the goods from one end to another.
Yes, but
to reduce the price and then even up. I'm saying the differential between the highest and the lowest is so high, and that's partly responsible. What is partly responsible, in my view, could be high cost of transport.
All right. So the issue that I would look at really is protecting the Nigerians out there, especially the vulnerable ones, because a lot of the times we find ourselves in a situation where we're basically being taken for a ride by these service providers sometimes, and I do understand because the cost of bringing in materials and building and all of that is actually quite high. But the other day I'm trying to help out a friend to find a house, and we go to this house and they're charging 800,000 for a room that is no bigger than my closet.
Yes, well, that's you are not talking about food now. We are talking about it's like even in Abuja, we have that experience. People often say you have so many unoccupied buildings, and yet buildings in Abuja, are very expensive. Of course, there's with respect to commodities, with respect to things like accommodation. Okay, yes, you can have some sort of regulation. The relevant authority can come in to say, okay, in this particular area, for example, it should be this. And I'm aware too that they've also tried to intervene with respect to even the payment of rent, where it's been canvassed that rent shouldn't be paid. Rent must not be paid in advance. People must not demand that you pay your rent 1 year in advance. Rent should be monthly. But of course, it also has to do with maybe legislation. These are things that legislation can take care of. If we have laws in the country today that will mandate landlords not to demand rent in advance, but to demand them in arrears, as you stay in a house, you pay. Yes. Okay. So these are things that, as I say, legislation will do. But generally speaking, price controls, okay, particularly with respect to food, are counterproductive. They don't help. They distort the market. Price controls generally. Okay. Yes, because even in the case of housing or accommodation, I've said yes, some sort of regulation can be done, but there's also a way you do it. You also make it difficult for landlords to
make his money back.
Yeah, make the thing available. Okay, you also stifle investment in those areas. So in order to stifle investment in the housing sector, for example, you wouldn't want to overregulate that sector.
All right, so we have an incoming government coming in very soon. What are some things that they need to take a look at? The first thing that they need to handle as far as reducing the cost of living in Nigeria, and what are some challenges you think that they would face along the way? Yes,
you see, one of the things that is being talked about now, as a major challenge of the next government, is the issue of fuel subsidy. Okay. Fuel subsidy is costing governments, so much. Part of why interest rates in the country today, are high, is also because government is borrowing. Government is borrowing to subsidize fuel. So the medium to long-term solution is remove fuel subsidy. So that's going to be the first challenge the government is going to have. But of course, that removing fuel subsidy immediately will also compound the issue of this rising cost of living. Inflation, and that will also mean increasing the rate of poverty, because as inflation rate is going up, poverty rate is also rising. Okay, so For me, I'm in support of subsidy removal, but we should have a way of phasing it out, number one. And even before completely removing it, the government should put in place compensation measures that are pro-poor, such that when the thing eventually goes, the impact on the poor masses will not be significantly felt. So, and these compensation measures can be in the form of health, education, and transport. I've often said, in the case of health, for example, let them expand the National Health Insurance Scheme. The coverage is very low, and less than 5% of the population is very low. A lot of people in Nigeria today, particularly those who are not government workers, can't access healthcare facilities. They don't enjoy health insurance scheme. So such can be expanded such that out-of-pocket expenses are reduced. The moment you reduce someone out-of-pocket expenses, even if you're paying the person 30,000 naira, you're not increasing minimum wage, but you reduce the out-of-pocket expense the person makes, okay, the impact of any rising cost will be very much less on that person. So the next government should think of compensation measures, pro-poor measures, okay, that will enable the masses cushion the impact of inflation in Nigeria going forward.
All right, thank you. That being said, we have come to the end of our show for today. Financial analyst, Professor Uche Uwalike, thank you so much for joining us today. And to our viewers out there, thank you so much for watching. But if you did miss the show, you can catch it on our social media handles. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and a few other social media platforms. Just look up Trust TV News, and you'll definitely find us there. Well, a happy Sallah to our Muslim brothers and sisters out there. My name is Chamunda Beng. Come back again. Let's talk numbers.